We have a no screen policy at our house. Our kids do not have a phone. They do not, they're not on an iPad. They're on nothing at all. That has been something that we've established.
That was Laura Trump describing her no screens policy at home with her kids. And as you'll hear in this episode, she is not alone. Many share her view, even people like Bill Gates, who helped design the very technology so many of us now struggle to control. Recently, a California jury found Meta and Google liable for designing their social media platforms in a manner that harmed a young user, awarding millions in damages and ruling for the first time at this scale that the companies were responsible for the addictive design choices baked into their platforms. A couple of months later, a New Mexico jury hit Meta with a $325 million verdict for misleading users about the safety of its products and for putting children at risk. What the legal system has brought to light is something that most of us have grappled with in some form for the last decade. The idea that these platforms are addictive and that they've been harming people, both young and old, who use them compulsively. So the question is no longer whether tech and social media addiction is real. The question, the harder question, and the one I want to answer in this episode is what we can actually do about it. Hello and welcome to the Dr. Suzette Glasner podcast. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. I'm an addiction scientist and clinical psychologist, and today I want to take you through what the research is now showing about how to actually reduce addictive phone and social media use, not by relying on willpower, because we know that doesn't work, but by applying the same evidence-based principles and techniques that we use every day in addiction treatment to help people overcome alcohol and drug use disorders. Phone addiction is clinically a behavioral addiction with striking similarities to alcohol and drug addiction. So the same things that get people off of cocaine, methamphetamine, even heroin are the things that get them out of compulsive scrolling, believe it or not. We just have to apply them deliberately. In a recent episode, I talked about how attention problems in young people are increasingly being misdiagnosed as ADHD, when in many cases, what we're really seeing is the effects of compulsive phone use and social media use that has actually produced cognitive deficits that look exactly like attention deficit disorder, but stem from a different cause and are actually very responsive to intervention, which I'll talk about shortly. So if you missed that episode, I'd recommend going back to it after this episode because the two together really form one picture that phone overuse is changing the brain in ways that look very clinical. And we now have data showing those changes are in fact reversible. You might have seen the New York Times also just recently published a great primer on this, phone addiction remedies, in their personal tech section. And I'd recommend reading that one through. Today, I want to take you deeper into the clinical why behind these strategies and the practical how-to so that you can just start using them right away. So the first question is it addiction or is it just heavy use? A quick word just on assessment before we get into the techniques. So researchers have drawn the right parallel, which is that phone use becomes problematic when it interferes with your social life or your ability to function in important life roles like at work or as a spouse or a partner. The practical reality is that whether you're somebody who uses your phone too much or someone with a genuine behavioral addiction to your phone is going to become much clearer once you make an effort to change your behavior around your device. If you can apply some of the techniques I'm going to talk about today and you see changes in your behavior that you're happy with, then you probably are more of a heavy user of tech. If you find that you are unable to cut back on the amount of time that you're spending scrolling or on your phone, despite making a genuine effort, that's really important information too, because it means that you might need a more structured approach delivered by a mental health care professional. The strongest practical strategy you can use is what we'll refer to as a family media strategy. So not only Bill Gates, the man who built one of the most successful tech companies in history, delays giving his kids phones until they were 14, but he also kept them off the dinner table. Here's what you need to know. Studies show two things. Number one, parents' phone use predicts their kids' problematic phone use. Seems obvious, but I really want you to hear that. You are modeling a certain kind of behavior around your phone, and if you can't put it down, your kids are all that less likely to be able to put their devices down as well. Second, you want to keep phones out of two places, the bedroom and the dining room. Those are the two highest yield environments where phone use is doing the most damage. Why? The bedroom, because it disrupts sleep, and sleep loss itself worsens everything else, from cognitive to emotional symptoms of phone overuse, attention, mood, impulse control, all of it. And the dining room, because it disrupts those social bonds and the family attachment that we know are protective against the exact mental health problems excessive phone use creates. What does that look like if you're successful? Research shows that keeping phones out of the bedroom improves sleep measurably, while keeping phones out of the dining room reduces binge eating. Think about it. You're eating without thinking about it because you're busy on your phone with one hand and eating with the other, right? And it actually improves family connection. So for most adults, doing this means the phone is not charged on your nightstand. It means one or two specific times of day when you're with the people who matter most. And the device is in another room entirely. For families, this is really a bi-directional behavioral contract. So the parents are part of the contract, not just the kids. And the data on this are really clear that kids' behavior really tracks the parents' behavior. So if the rule only applies to the kids, the rule is just going to be that much less effective. So let's talk about why the content that you're consuming on your phone matters in terms of addictive behavior and not just the amount of time or the minutes that you spend on your phone. Half of American smartphone users and 80% of those who are under age 30 worry that they're using their device too much. And yet we rely on our devices for so many things. We rely on them for work, for managing our finances, for connecting with friends and family. So when we think about cutting back on using them, what should we actually aim to eliminate? First, let's think about the content you need on your phone versus the content that might be leading you to feel out of control and delivering limited value. Social media apps have been referred to as the Doritos or Oreos of digital content. We don't need them, but we like them because of that dopamine hit that they produce. So here's the clinical reason why the content that you're consuming matters, even more than the minutes. This really has to do with what we refer to as reinforcement schedules. So in addiction science, we study different ways that behaviors get reinforced or rewarded to learn what kind of schedule is driving addictive behavior. And here's where you get a really strong pull to repeat a behavior in a way that could become out of control. When you're on what's called an intermittent variable reinforcement schedule, that means the rewards are unpredictable and they're delivered on an unpredictable timeline. That's the schedule that drives compulsive gambling. So think about a slot machine. You just keep on pulling that slot over and over again because you know you're going to get a reward sometime, but you don't know when and you don't know how often. So you just keep trying over and over again. And then every time it happens, you get that dopamine hit, and that rewards the persistence of trying and trying and trying to hit that moment when you get lucky and you get that dopamine rush. So that's exactly the schedule that's built into TikTok, Instagram, X. Most posts that you scroll through are forgettable. But every few swipes, you hit something that is genuinely very interesting and engaging, a funny video, a beautiful image. Now, when you break that reinforcement pattern, here's what happens. There was a recent study of this. They followed almost 500 adults who used a phone blocking app called Freedom to remove internet access from their smartphones for 14 days. So now they're just using their phones for calling and texting. So what we call this in addiction treatment is removing a trigger for addictive behavior, because having the internet on the phone triggers this sort of compulsive use. So what happened when they removed that trigger is that daily screen time reduced by 50%. And here's the impact of reducing their screen time by 50%. Sustained attention improved by an amount that is equivalent to reversing 10 years of age-related cognitive decline. Depression symptoms improved more than we typically see with antidepressants, and their overall mental well-being went up significantly. Importantly, these effects persisted even past the study window for many participants. And in fact, over 90% of participants improved on one or more of three things: mental health, well-being, or sustained attention. Now, this loops directly back to the ADHD point that I made earlier, which is that many people, kids and adults alike, who believe that they have ADHD may in fact have a reversible cognitive impairment caused by the very platforms that they are using on a daily basis. The good news from research is that this impairment is not permanent. 2 weeks of structured separation from the device can restore an enormous amount of what was lost. The bottom line is you want to remove your triggers. You can use tools like Brick, Freedom, or Bloom. Look them up. They're apps that restrict access to apps that are on your phone or internet access on your phone. Another method is auditing your notifications. Do you really need that buzz from all the sources in your settings? One study showed that reducing smartphone notifications and receiving smartphone notifications in batches rather than continuously throughout the day improved attentional functioning. And then finally, app deletion. Go through your phone and see if there are any apps that you really don't need that are on there. Less is more. Then finally, I want to talk about the replacement principle. So this is another principle that we draw from addiction treatment models for drugs and alcohol, which is that you can't simply stop scrolling. You have to replace it with something else. The replacement has to be very deliberate, and it really has to be matched with what the phone was specifically doing for you. So if your phone is mostly relief from boredom, then the replacement has to be something very genuinely engaging. It could be exercise, a hobby with your hands, a creative project, time outside. If it's mostly social connection, then the replacement has to be some kind of social contact, preferably in person, not just any activity. One of the keys, though, if you're trying to replace the phone with other activities, is really bringing some structure to it. So figuring out what times of day you're scrolling and scheduling other things to do. Otherwise, time can just get away from you. And this is where my workbook, the Addiction Recovery Skills Workbook, can really be helpful. You can get it on Amazon. You can work through the exercises on triggers to understand what triggers you to scroll or waste time on your phone, and the section on pleasurable activities or rediscovering rewards. And there's one more thing. Think about when and how to introduce devices to your kids. Because once they've been introduced, then you're in a whole new chapter of trying to regulate their use in a way that prevents them from developing these kind of addictive relationships with technology. Here's what social psychologist and author of The Anxious Generation recommends about devices in kids' bedrooms.
No screens of any kind in the bedroom ever. This is the rule I wish to God I had done when my kids were little. No screens of any kind in their bedrooms ever. Now you start with that. You can have a TV in the living room. They can watch TV sometimes. You can have a computer in the living room or kitchen or whatever. They can go online. They can Google things. But if you start with that policy, then screens are just things that they sometimes use. But as soon as you allow them in the bedroom, they become things that they have a relationship with and that they're on. Many of them will be on almost all the time. So start with that.
Now, you don't have to do this all at once if you're feeling like you're pretty far from that now, but you can start making some gradual changes in that direction. So for example, just first move the TV out of the bedroom. Now, on the question of when to seek help, what do you do when these strategies aren't enough? Or when you've tried all these things and the pull is still just feeling very overpowering to you? That's not failure. That is data telling you that you may need a little additional help. For most of us, it's probably just heavy use. And so here are the things, just to sum up, that you can try. And if you can't do them on your own, then you can go to the step of seeking professional help. The first is try removing triggers to the highest yield environments in your life. So that's the bedroom, the dining table. And then another trick is trying not to engage with your phone for the first 30 minutes or first hour after you wake up. When we're evaluating someone for addiction to something like nicotine, or we're trying to help them quit smoking, We know that one indicator of the severity of their addiction to nicotine is smoking first thing in the morning. We can apply that same principle to the phone. If you need to look at it the minute you open your eyes, see what happens. If you set a timer for 30 minutes, get up, make your coffee, do something else, get ready, make breakfast, and then check your phone. It's going to give you a better sense of control. And how difficult it is for you to do that is an indicator of how much of a problem this is, your attachment to your phone. Second is cut the apps that use intermittent reinforcement before worrying about your total minutes. And when I say cut, I don't mean stop using social media altogether. For most people, that's not realistic. I mean cut back your use of them. Maybe use some of these apps like Brick or Freedom to help you set certain times that are internet free for you, that are times that you need to focus on other things, and see how that goes. And then third, replace the reward very deliberately and specifically, match to what the phone was actually doing for you. So match to, if you're using the phone for boredom, figure out some activities that you can do that will give you some space from your phone. If you're using the phone to entertain you, figure out some other forms of entertainment. If you're using the phone to escape from negative emotions, then you might want to try meditation or some other kind of self-help strategies for negative emotions, or you might want to seek therapy. So the Meta and Google verdicts have settled the question of whether the platforms harmed us. Now we get to settle the question of what to do about it. The science is really on our side. We just have to use it. Thank you for being here. I hope you learned something valuable, and I look forward to seeing you next time.